Do you think that we're on the cusp of something really new? And do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I think immersive entertainment is going to be real this time. I would caution you that it's not the first time that we've all looked at doing virtual reality. In fact, maybe some of you know, like in the parks at Walt Disney World, there's a thing called Disney Quest where we have a virtual reality experience that lasted, I think, 17 or 20 years in the parks. And this was, 20 years ago, people were predicting now is the age for virtual reality and kind of petered out. It may have had something to do with the fact that the headsets were $50,000 each and the computers.
And it was this big and weighed about 12 pounds.
It needed to be counterbalanced with ropes into the ceiling and things. It was a lot harder to install at your house than it is today. But even now, with the hardware being more cost-effective and more portable and more easy to use with a computer you can buy and play games on, it'll also power this, or even a mobile phone, which will power a less immersive but still very interesting experience with lots of opportunities for storytelling. Even still, not everybody here has had a chance to try it, and you guys are very well connected to the industry. There are lots of people who haven't even heard that this is coming next, so we're at the very early stages of a long road ahead.
Well, I think it's interesting that you refer to the theme park world. It's one of the things I talk a lot about in my presentations. I very often make the reference that now we have the technological ability to strap a theme park to our face. And that, in and of itself, is an interesting way to look at what this medium means. And I have a feeling, let's see, everybody been to a theme park at one point in time in their life? I'll bet you most of the hands went up, right? So that's where, to me, the next connection point is.
The challenge for us, when we produce the Walking Dead TV show, it's always about how do we get people to engage, right? We go to extraordinary lengths to try to find ways to get people to feel something, anything, feel it connected to a character, a moment, a scene. But when we first did the demos of the Gear VR, the first reaction that we had was like, we're there, and there's this sense of unease. We call it presence, right? We talk about this a lot, which is the notion of that when you're in a VR experience, it's not quite the same as when you're watching television, right? There's not that distance. You're actually in there, and it gives you a sense as to like, okay, well, if I'm a passive viewer, but I'm in there, it's kind of this, some people get a little uneasy with it at first. And so I mentioned that to the Samsung folks when they were demonstrating it. They're like, no, we're working on it, we'll get it out, don't worry. And what came back, I was like, no, that's great, because I mean, that's exactly the type of thing that I'd love to get someone to handle. And so I'm a new parent, right? And so when I go to the park with my kids, you have that sort of weird communal parenting experience that goes on where like everyone's kind of watching everyone's kid, and then there's always that moment where some kid's like behind the slide or under the swing and you just can't see him, and everybody freaks out for a second, and then everything goes back to normal. At least it's just me. Maybe it's just me. It happens to me like every time I go to the park. And so we were just like, what if we started there? Like, what if we started with that amazing sense of dread and paranoia that happens at a park when you can't see a kid? And if you as a viewer are there, if you as a viewer are sort of have presence, then you were kind of culpable as well. Mm-hmm. When that kid goes missing and is gone, hence the title Gone, like the great thing is you instantly feel a sense of attachment to help this mom find her kid because you were there, you're responsible.
But Dave, maybe you want to talk a little bit about how you used audio, because you use audio in a very unique way as well to tell that story, to guide people around as to where they should look.
Well, I just want to hit the visuals for 1 second. We shot this last June, and honestly, we encountered an entire range of problems. The technology is evolving so fast. There's actually been 3 generations of cameras developed since last June that some of the major problems that we had last year are already gone, right? So just one of the things was we couldn't actually do monitoring other than on a fixed camera. So we now have the ability to actually have monitors. So you can now set up, you can actually see what you're shooting in real time, which is, helpful. The other thing that came out was we didn't have real quick stitch technology, right? So what we were doing was we would do a quick stitch, would basically mean we were combining, all the camera's views together, but it would take an hour and a half to 2 hours to get a quick stitch. So once you did the shot, we would be rushing first shot to be quick stitch so that hopefully we can approve the shot by the time we were finished shooting, because otherwise we didn't know if we didn't get it, which is, I mean, if anybody here produces footage, I mean, that it's just saying it actually gives me hives. I feel a little itchy from that. So having the ability to see what you're shooting and to actually stitch it together in real time, I think those have been tremendously advantageous.
You're a graduate of Harvard. You have a law degree from NYU. So with those kind of chops, I want you to tell us why you think VR has a really good chance to succeed, and what does success mean to you, coming from worlds where you have a traditional high-level education background, and you're a very smart, thoughtful guy, but different thought than these guys, right? We're in the technical trenches and figuring out technical things that drive it, but you're coming from a whole other direction. Why do you think everybody's sitting in this audience today? Why do you think there's so much swirl around the next sort of media experience in VR? And do you think it's actually going to succeed from some of the background that you've had?
Well, I think that I was sort of there in the early days of seeing it in the late '90s, where I also, everyone was like, oh yeah, VR is here, it's coming, and the answer was just no. It just wasn't. There was nothing practical about it. I think that now the technology is there that. Look, I'm going to back up. If you have the Vive experience, or you go in the Vive experience, I think the Vive experience is amazing. You get those high frame rates. It's a really rich, lush environment. I don't think that the Vive currently is designed to be mass market, right? The price point's not there. The reason why we want to work with Samsung and the Gear VR was because until it comes out on PlayStation, I feel like that was the way in which so many people have Samsung phones. It was a great opportunity to reach not a mass audience, but a very large audience, right? We were able to get out, I think somewhere maybe approaching 1 million units of the Gear VR sort of in the market in the US. So there is, okay, that's a meaningful size. So we actually have, we've gotten some early statistics where the stickiest content on VR, and what we find is that the people that experience it, like, it's available in episodes, so it's 5 to 12 minutes an episode, and there's about 11 episodes total. The people who experience one episode, we have almost no drop-off rate. And if you watch 2 episodes, you're
going the whole way, right?
So there's some people watch 1 episode like, okay, that's it. I'm not there yet. It's not my thing. But pretty much there's a small drop-off from 1 to 2, but from 2 on, we have people, and that to me indicates that there's traction there. Comparing it to, we have a big comic book publishing business. We publish The Walking Dead, we publish Invincible, we have a whole line of comics that we publish. And we'll see in early days on a comic, if you have a big drop off from 1 to 2 and no stability from there, you're done, right? If you don't stabilize around 2 or 3, you're toast. But it's, Walking Dead being the best example, when you have that sort of, your first issue does well and then your second sort of gains traction, it tells us that there's some sort of resonance in the marketplace. And I feel like Gone, we're seeing the same traction that I would expect from a potential hit comic book. Now look, again, we made millions of mistakes in Gone. I think the experience itself has still come out to be a fantastic narrative experience, but the ability to say, hey, we made all these mistakes and it still works, right, to me, and that people are engaging on the way that I like, I feel VR is here. I think the question really is going to come, and we were talking a little bit about this, somebody needs to have that killer app, and it could be Bullet Train, it could be the Tatooine, I feel like there needs to be that, the Game of Thrones, the Walking Dead, the House of Cards thing that's like, oh no, you must get this experience, because if you don't have it, you're missing out on that water cooler conversation. I would sort of tend to echo that. I think gaming is going to be obviously one of the great entry points, obviously, given what's going on with the PlayStation. I think having that ability will allow a mass market to sort of develop around VR. I think the one thing that, we're not thinking about the thing that's going to make VR tip. And I think it's going to come from an angle that's not yet been discovered. I think, all the things that we're doing is trying to sort of rough out the shape of the elephant, but we haven't yet figured out what the full shape of the elephant looks like. And I feel that sort of, I think it's going to come from making 100 more mistakes before we find what that thing is. But I think when that thing comes, it will be like, there's that moment of Facebook where it was sort of like you had people that were like, what is Facebook? Why do I have to be on Facebook? I have friends. I don't need friends online. And there's this sort of like mocking of it. And then like two years later, you're like, oh yeah, there's 1 billion people like on the platform. And I think the same thing will happen with VR. I'm not sure if it'll be by 2020. That, I think that thing will have been invented. Whether it'll actually hit the tipping point, I'm not sure.